Today's discussion will focus on how we accelerate progress to ensure the meaningful participation of uniformed women in UN peace operations and to create peacekeeping missions that better reflect the populations they serve. We have a strong framework to guide these efforts with the seminal Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, and subsequent Security Council resolutions, including 2538. A commitment to advance the role of women in peacekeeping is reflected in the Secretary General's Action for Peacekeeping Initiative and the A4P Plus Action Plan, as well as the UN Department of Peace Operations Uniform Gender Parity Strategy. The challenge, as almost everything at the UN, lies with implementation. The Elsie Initiative for Women in Peace Operations is one example where member states, many of whom are represented here today, and the UN continue to work together to move the dial on implementation and on women in peacekeeping. As part of the Elsie Initiative, Canada, together with Norway, was very pleased to support DCAF to develop and pilot a barrier assessment methodology called the Measuring Opportunities for Women in Peace Operations, or MOWIP assessment methodology. This methodology offers security institutions from troop and police contributing, troop, police, justice, and corrections contributing countries an opportunity to better understand the barriers facing women personnel. Military and police institutions in more than 15 countries, including the Canadian Armed Forces, have either undergone or are in the process of conducting a barrier assessment. Barrier assessments enhance our knowledge about the experiences of both women and men, peacekeepers within security institutions and in mission contexts, which can inform efforts to advance critical peacekeeping reforms. We welcome this opportunity to hear more about DCAF's findings in the Global MOWIP report and look forward to discussing how we can collectively ensure peace operations are effective and inclusive. We will start with opening remarks, then we will hear from our panel who will help us dive a little bit deeper into some of these issues, followed by an interactive Q&A and discussion. It is now my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Ambassador Trine Himmelbæk, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway. The floor is yours. Sorry, I made this.
Thank you, Richard. And this is really a great event, and it's so nice to be among so many friends, partners, allies on this important topic. So thank you all for joining us in the launch of this very important report. Norway is honored to co-host along with our close colleagues from Canada, Ghana, Jordan, and Uruguay, as well as DCAF and the Elsie Initiatives. And I think the report testifies to the importance of the Elsie Initiative. And its focus on evidence-based research is a key element in moving the women, peace and security agenda forward. And I would like to commend DCAF for the important role that they have and will continue to play in this regard. And I have had the pleasure to also serving in Geneva, so I can say that I really know you. So the words are really from me and not only my written notes. Norway is a strong supporter of increasing the number of women in peacekeeping, including at the leadership level. However, let me underline that this is not only about numbers and percentages, but it's really about the word meaningful, meaningful participation in all peace operations. And it is, as in all lines of life and work, we're convinced that more female peacekeepers and a better gender balance at all levels are vital to finding the sustainable solutions to both conflict, but also to implementing the difficult mission mandates that are passed in the Security Council. And one should never underestimate the effect that meeting women peacekeepers in uniform has on local police or military personnel in increasing trust and gaining access in particular. This is the core issue of why advancing women's participation in peace operations matters for operational effectiveness. Female peacekeepers should equally be able to contribute their unique competencies and abilities to advance the complex UN mission mandates. We need to pursue a comprehensive approach if we are to succeed in effectively recruiting and retaining women peacekeepers for all these reasons. We must operationalize 1325 within UN operations by bringing gendered perspectives on UN analysis and decision-making. So this requires a shift in perspective from short-term to long-term and from individual to institution. This means systemic change to enable safe, respectful, and inclusive working environments for female peacekeepers and addressing all the barriers to their participation in operational roles. So it's time to recognize that the meaningful participation of women in peace operations is not a nice to have or even about gender equality. It's an imperative for more effective operations and increased security. So I look forward to learning from all of you, hearing the experiences from colleagues, and discussing the report's concrete recommendations for concrete policy actions. And we have used already a lot on this on our tenure on the Security Council, but I'm really happy that we now have the finished report so we can all share the lessons in that report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trine. I would now like to introduce Ambassador Thomas Gerber, Director of the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. Ambassador Gerber previously served here as the DPR for Switzerland. So welcome back to New York, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Richard, Trine, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It's indeed great to be back in New York as part of the UN family, a family which I call home, my second home. And it's also great to be part of such an interesting and relevant discussion we're having today. It's fair to say that the UN system and many troop and police contributing countries have made significant strides in the last few years and have delivered truly encouraging results in terms of realizing Secretary General Guterres' vision for gender parity and integrating it into peacekeeping. But we're obviously not where we should be. We need to continue this journey towards gender parity or gender equality with determination and leadership. We at DCAF, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, will obviously continue to support this journey to the very best of our abilities. DCAF, as most of you would know, is a Geneva-based center of excellence in the area of security sector governance and reform. And we support over 80 countries worldwide in their efforts to strengthen developing their security sectors. And of course, we also support many multilateral organizations, and in particular, the UN. And we do this based on a number of principles, such as good governance, the rule of law, respect for human rights, and of course, respect for the principle of gender equality, which is such a crucially important precondition for any well-functioning security institution. DCAF is proud to have contributed to the Elsie Initiative since 2018. The potential of this visionary initiative, launched by Canada in 2017 and financially supported not only by Canada, but also Norway, continues to be highly significant for increasing women's meaningful participation in peace operations and for advancing long-term and sustainable peace. The Global MOWIP report we're launching today sets out concrete pathways towards enabling and enhancing peace operations based on evidence from MOWIP assessments in 4 countries and 6 security institutions on 2 different continents. A close partnership with Cornell University and many other research partners from 8 pilot countries have allowed us to develop a truly innovative approach, I would argue, to assessing barriers and opportunities in relation to women's participation in peace operations. The unique and innovative research methodology called Measuring Opportunities for Women in Peace Operations, or as I've already mentioned it in short, MOWIP, is a rigorous and comprehensive assessment tool which supports security institutions in developing and implementing evidence-based policy and programmatic action to overcome barriers and leverage good international practice. Through our work with many national security institutions in TPCCs, we've been able to help these countries, partner countries concerned, enhance their strategies for increasing gender equality in their own security institutions. But the identified trends and best practices will also, of course, prove invaluable for informing multilateral policy development and action in support of peacekeeping. And I'm sure that our colleague Fatima Sea, the Director of Coordination for DPPA and DPO, has much more to say on this particular dimension. Ghana and Uruguay have been among the very first countries to complete a MOWIP assessment, thus providing inspiring examples for other countries and contributing to a growing body of evidence which can guide us and others. I'm delighted that we will learn more about the experience of both countries in a moment. Ghana will be represented by Brigadier General Tuom Barima, who is very well positioned to provide the perspective of a peacekeeper and give us a reality check at the same time. And Uruguay is here represented by Ambassador Gabriela Gonzalez, who will share the experience of her country from a more political vantage point. Let me also take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, to thank all other pilot countries that have led the way by undertaking a MOWIP assessment in the last couple of years. But let me also thank the many TPCCs which are currently undergoing such an assessment, thanks to the support of the Elsie Initiative Fund. While all national assessments and assessment reports will go a long way towards making national security institutions more inclusive, gender balanced and accountable, the Global MOWIP report will inspire further transformational change at the international, at the multilateral level, and will contribute to making UN peace operations truly fit for the future. Thanks again to Canada and Norway for spearheading and supporting the great Elsie Initiative. And let me also, in addition, thank Ghana, Jordan, and Uruguay for co-hosting this launch event today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gerber. We will now turn to Fatima Zia, Director of Coordination for the UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Department of Peace Operations. Fatih is joining us on Zoom. So here's our first test. Fatih, help us pass. We'll go to the screens now.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Arbiter. Can you hear me? Excellent. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, who is unfortunately unable to participate in this event due to official travel, I would like to offer my thanks to the Permanent Mission of Canada for hosting this event under the auspices of Deputy Permanent Representative Ambassador Arbiter, and as well to the co-hosts, the Permanent Missions of Ghana, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Norway, and Uruguay. I would also like to express my gratitude to Ambassador Thomas Gerber, the Director of DCAF, as well as to Christina Finch and her team for inviting me to speak today. I'm sorry that due to some complicated scheduling issues, I'm actually a few blocks away from you, but not able to be in the room at this time. But it's great to be with you, and the Department of Peace Operations is pleased to support the launch of the Global MOWIP report. The MOWIP methodology is a key contribution to advancing our collective understanding of the barriers that are still preventing women from meaningfully participating in peace operations. And therefore, we very much welcome the Global MOWIP report as a first lessons learned exercise that translates evidence from the 4 countries that have conducted the MOWIP barrier assessment into inspiring recommendations. The Women, Peace and Security Agenda and the Secretary General's gender parity and equality mandates are core political priorities for the Department of Peace Operations. And they're also key priorities of A4P+, our implementation strategy for action for peacekeeping. We are committed to making our work more gender responsive, to creating an inclusive and conducive working environment for all peacekeepers, excuse me, and to increasing the meaningful participation of women at all levels and in all roles. In this regard, the UN Secretariat is already taking actions that address some of the recommendations outlined in the Global MOWIP report, and I'll just mention a few of these. First, regarding the attitudes of peacekeepers, we have developed guidelines on integrating a gender perspective into military and police operations, and we are working on innovative training materials that address gender-based discrimination and aim to create an inclusive work environment. Second, regarding conduct that constitutes harassment, the United Nations works with member states to support the training of troops before they are deployed on the prevention of misconduct. We're also providing additional training and missions, raising awareness of the standards of conduct and the mechanisms for reporting misconduct. Third, in terms of access to mental health and psychosocial support services, the United Nations is working on a mental health policy and strategic framework for uniformed personnel. This will involve the deployment of tools for support to peacekeepers before, during, and post-deployment. We're also working on a post-traumatic stress disorder implementation project, which will also be developing tools for all deployment phases. Fourth, to enhance the representation of women across ranks and roles. Since the launch of the Uniform Gender Parity Strategy, there have been some noteworthy improvements. For example, women now make up 21.5% of staff officers and military observers, as compared to 8.2% in 2018. And women make up 14.4% of foreign police units, up from 7% in 2018. And in 2021, the first ever woman deputy military advisor for peace operations was appointed at UN headquarters, and parity was reached among heads of police and corrections components in the field. However, women are still underrepresented in our military contingents, where they represent only 5.8% of our troops, and in traditionally male-dominated roles in peacekeeping. So we've made a lot of progress, but we know we can and must do more. And we can only do it in partnership with troop and police contributing countries. We rely on you to deploy personnel with the right attitudes and behaviors, to address the root causes of the inequalities in your national services, and to address instances of misconduct under your jurisdiction. We count on you to provide women with equal opportunities for recruitment, retention, and promotion in your national institutions so that they can play all roles and functions at all levels in peacekeeping. And we depend on you to take appropriate action to support peacekeepers when they return home following deployment, for example, as regards mental health and psychosocial support. The recommendations outlined in the Global MOWIP report therefore require concerted and coordinated action by our peace operations and by member states to bring about change. The Department of Peace Operations will continue to support member states and work in coordination with you to advance towards the achievement of gender equality in our operations. As the Global MOWIP report puts it, this will be central to long-term and sustainable peace and to peace operations that are fit for the future. Thank you again, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Fatih, for being with us, even online. It's now my great honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Ambassador Gabriela Gonzalez, the DPR of Uruguay. Uruguay has led by example, as we've already heard, in increasing the meaningful participation of women in peacekeeping. I understand that all of Uruguay security institutions have completed their MOWIP barrier assessments. I wish I could say the same for Canada. We're getting there, but we have Uruguay's example to follow. And Uruguay has also been a strong supporter of the Elsie Initiative since its outset. Ambassador Gonzalez, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. And thank you for the Mission of Canada for hosting this meeting. It's an honor to be here today to talk about a topic that I really like very much. And I've been following since 1994 when I used to work in the Ministry of Defense. Also, I would like to thank the co-hosts for being with us today, Ghana, Jordan, and Norway. Also, I would like to say that it's great to be here today because I see some familiar faces from the UN, from our previous life as a delegate. So I'm very happy to be here today. I would like to reiterate the commitment to the Elsie Initiative and its involvement since the beginning. It's been a very useful tool for the Tpccs, increase the participation of female personnel in the peacekeeping operations. Nevertheless, it might be taken into account that the participation of women in peace reflect the participation of women in the armed and police forces, for which it is necessary first to encourage them to belong to the forces at national level, and secondly, implement social policies of containment for deployment of women, and also the need to adapt the spaces in the mission themselves. Before coming here, I was talking with my military advisor in order to see how many women we have now, and we have just only 63. I thought the number would be higher. So I think we have a lot of work to do. And I have to say, I think we don't have any force commander yet. So when we are talking about gender equality, it's a national policy in Uruguay. We are working not just in the area of peacekeeping or troops. It's a cross-cutting issue along the whole society. Especially for us, for the developing countries, we really appreciate all the support of countries who are in better position to help us in order to monitoring, to follow policies, and to make us be better in this process. Uruguay is so far, I think now with Ghana, one of the beginners to complete the MOWIP, as my colleague said before, report at the level of the armed forces and its national policy. And at the same time, they are already working on the implementation of recommendations that come from this report. We hope, like previous speaker said, that other countries join to this model. Based on the MOWIP study in a reference to participation on the armed force in peace operation mission, was possible to identify barriers and the impact that they have in the Uruguayan armed forces on the increase of the participation of these women in peace operation. So in July 2020, the MOD of the Uruguay submitted a letter of interest, a project modality, to apply to the Elsie funds with the goal to increase the participation of women in peace operation. And we are awaiting the fund's final decision with interpretation. I think we are in a good process. The letter of interest was proposed to develop strategies and action that allow improving the significant participation of female personnel in peacekeeping, considering the roles that Uruguay has in the UN deployments and requirements imposed by the UN under the Uniform Strategy of Gender Parity. Our target at this stage is to increase the availability of women suitable for deployment, which implies increased recruitment of more women and achieve to keep and retain this personnel in the forces and strengthen the skill that is required in this peace operation, considering that the MOWIP barrier study found that women are overrepresented in administrative roles and feel less prepared for the deployment. The following activities that I'm going to mention after are included in the Uruguay project, through which is sought to reduce this barrier. I'd like to say that since I was working not in the foreign affairs, if not in defense services, the number was really, really small. I think the 63 is a great advantage in the last 20 years. Myself, I want to be deployed in Angola when I was 22 years old. And I applied, and my boss, who at the moment was a commander, a colonel, told me, you can't go there. I said, why? You can't go because this is not suitable for women. They are not prepared, and it's gonna be difficult for them to have a lady between the forces. And that's so all my hopes to go to Angola, that when we were deployed at that moment there, they go, but I really want to do it. And it was like one, two in the forces, and I couldn't do it. So I came back later and started to work in peacekeeping at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so I'm very happy to see that we're doing better. For that reason, I'm saying that because I really see that we need to work on that. Defense in general, we have administrative like in management, women working with, but in the forces, the increases, it's been like in the last 10 years. So still we have, as I said before, we have a lot of work to do. And I think it's not be easy, must be deployed in the field. It's a different story than when you are sitting in a desk in the capitals or here at the UN. As many colleagues I see here, we've been listening to reports of the Secretary General of the Fifth Committee or executing the mandate of the Security Council. But when we are there, we just read numbers. We have people there. Actually, we'd like to have more people there. We have to offer, the environment to do it better. I'm gonna come back to the MOWIP the point that we pick in our report and project is, well, advertising and information campaign to attract personnel to the armed forces. Number 2, family and care and support policies addressing to facilitate female deployment. 3, 6-month tour of duty for women with dependent school-age children and can be extended for men from single-parent household and with dependent children of the same characteristics. And 4, develop mobile training teams. And 5, systematic study focusing of the structural causes of the barriers identified in the MOWIP study. In this sense, we are willing to share our experience in preparing the MOWIP report with interesting countries, highlighting that at regional level, Uruguay has organized instances of dissemination or sharing information in the Elsie Initiative. Finally, I would like to thank the DCAF for preparing the MOWIP global report, to value the exercise and analysis and comparison of the MOWIP reports of various countries, and to state that recommendation that may serve as an input for consideration of countries and organizations, both internally and international level, and also in the multilateral forums. Well, thank you.
Sí. Gracias, Gabriela, por compartir sus experiencias personales y las experiencias de Uruguay también. Thank you so much, Gabriela, for sharing your personal and your country's experiences with us. I now have the pleasure to introduce our panel. Christina Finch is head of the Gender and Security Division at DCAF. She's a human rights lawyer and advocate with more than 25 years of experience in advancing human rights. Brigadier General Felicia Tumberaima, who is joining us online, served for 32 years in the Ghanaian Armed Forces, during which she served in 5 UN peacekeeping operations in Liberia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon, and Rwanda. She was appointed as the Director of Education in the Ghana Armed Forces and is presently Defense Attaché at the Ghana Embassy in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. I should note that Ghana is a real leader in deploying women to UN peacekeeping operations and has so much to offer in this regard. For those of you who are with me on the C-34 trip to Lebanon, we had the amazing privilege to meet with the Ghanaian contingent there and learn about their efforts to promote the women, peace and security agenda in country and see practically and operationally what that meant in that context. We also have with us Deborah Warren-Smith, who is the manager of the Elsie Initiative Fund for Uniformed Women in Peace Operations at UN Women. Deborah was a senior officer within the Australian Army with over 22 years of strategic and operational experience in the Australian Defence Force. During this time, she participated in 3 UN deployments as a military expert on mission and as a contingent commander. Her penultimate role in the Australian Army was the senior gender advisor. I'm gonna have them come up to the, just give a second for our in-person panelists to join us up here. And I'll ask a few questions and then we'll go to the Q&A. So first, thank you so much for joining us both online and in here in the room. First to Christina, we look forward to hearing from you on the key findings of DCAF's Global MOWIP report. How can its findings inform our collective ability to address the barriers to women's meaningful participation in UN peace operations?
Thank you very much.
think you've got to just push it. Yeah.
How's this?
That's
All
great.
right. Thank you very much, Ambassador. On behalf of DCAF, it's my absolute pleasure to present to you the findings and recommendations of the Global MOWIP report, Fit for the Future Peace Operations, Advancing Gender Equality to Achieve Long-Term Sustainable Peace. The report was supported by Global Affairs Canada and the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and in partnership with the Gender and Security Sector Lab at Cornell University. And I want to acknowledge Dr. Sabrina Karim, the head of the lab, who's also joining us online today. The methodology, as you've heard, is a rigorous and innovative tool designed to be used by police, gendarmerie, and military institutions. It measures across 10 issue areas, barriers, and opportunities for women's meaningful participation in peace operations. Individual security institutions of troop and police contributing countries have undergone this process. And like we've been hearing, we've got over half a dozen countries that are undergoing the process as part of the pilot initiative. Canada and Germany have undergone their own barrier assessments that have been informed by the MOWIP methodology. And we have a rich series of data that's come out of this work. So unlike the country reports, which focus on the institutional framework of a single security sector institution, the global report draws on aggregated data arising from the implementation of the MOWIP in 6 institutions in 4 troop and police contributing countries. And it helps provide international policy and practice insights that can be leveraged to contribute to the assessment, design, and implementation of gender equal and fit for the future peace operations. The Global MOWIP report, therefore, serves as a complement to the country reports and provides a solid evidence-based foundation to address opportunities and barriers of peace operations at the national and international level. It aims to provide guidance and indications of how to inform and strengthen pre-existing frameworks and efforts, both at the troop and police contributing country level and to the international policy level, to ensure peace operations become fit for the future. It provides evidence that in order to achieve long-term and sustainable peace, peace operations must be envisioned and planned, in part, as an effort to advance gender equality. So as you'll have the opportunity to see in this report, there's 4 main overarching and intersecting results that reinforce and complement each other. For each key finding, its policy and practice implications are presented. So very briefly, here are the 4. First, the first of the 4 findings talks about contact, non-kinetic or soft skills. These comprise a range of communication and psychosocial skills such as listening, observation, de-escalation, multicultural awareness. These are the most important skills a peacekeeper could have, according to the peacekeepers themselves. They need to know when and how to draw on contact skills, in contrast to when and how to draw on combat skills, with a mission mandate aimed at building sustainable peace. The design of peace operations and the selection, training, and deployment of peacekeepers must reflect the goal of building sustainable peace by prioritizing contact skills along with combat skills. Second, the role of gender roles. The second finding refers to the prevailing beliefs about men's and women's roles in peace operations and in society among uniformed personnel. And the data highlighted that there's a correlation between character profile of peacekeepers and their behavior and practices during peace operations. In other words, personnel who held rigid gender roles were significantly less likely to view misconduct as serious, including sexual exploitation and abuse, bribery, using violence against civilians. And importantly, they also appeared less likely to say they would report these forms of misconduct. And we feel that this is one of the most profound findings from the MOWIP. It directly links gender inequality attitudes and beliefs to conflict escalation and the acceptance of sexual and gender-based exploitation. And this isn't a standalone data point. This is adding to the growing body of research that correlates gender inequality attitudes with conflict escalation and the use of violence. And as such, character profiles also need to be prioritized alongside combat and contact skills. Third, social exclusion. Linked with the previous finding, data reveals that men and women experience social exclusion during a peace operation. This refers to the degree to which cohesion and group identity are based on creating an in-group by excluding those who do not look like or behave like those in the in-group. This usually takes the form of harassment, including sexual and gender-based harassment, bullying, and hazing. Both men and women experience this, but women much more so. They're much more likely to be part of the out-group and experience this. So we know that harassment and bullying behaviors impede gender equality and represent a significant barrier to building sustainable peace. And fourth and finally, the evidence indicates that men and women do not have adequate access during mission and reintegration to mental health and psychological support services. We know that quite often, men and women experience a variety of problems in mission and during reintegration. But again, the data found that women will experience this more so. So I'm pleased to say that listening to Messia, that many of our suggested solutions of increasing UN action on these issues are currently underway, including the mental health strategy, issues of harassment, and attitude of peacekeepers. So let me just close by saying, it's clear that there's a growing body of evidence that advancing gender equality is imperative for the success of peace operations, aligned with the wider 1325 agenda. And in carrying out these assessments, I just want to acknowledge the troop and police contributing countries that have taken these courageous steps already in opening themselves up and trying to address the barriers and lean into the opportunities. So with the Global MOWIP, we hope to offer similar guidance that will help inform and support existing frameworks and work in collaboration with troop and police contributing countries and the UN to make sure that fit for the future peace operations can leverage the most effective strategies to advance long-term sustainable peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christina, for that excellent summary and rundown. I think most of you have the report as well, but you can look through that as we think through some questions to pose to Christina and others. I'll now turn to Brigadier General Tuambaraima. We look forward to hearing more about your experience serving in a mission. Also welcome your thoughts on how the meaningful participation of women support more effective peace operations for host countries. Brigadier, thanks for joining us online. The floor is yours.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Greetings from Abidjan, where I'm stationed. As you may have heard already, I have done 5 UN missions in Rwanda, Lebanon, Eritrea, DRC, and finally in Liberia. My assignment this afternoon is to discuss the aspects of the MOWIP findings and recommendations that resonate with my experience as a female peacekeeper. My mission experience started in the year in 1994, but in the year 2000, when I went to Lebanon, that was in the days when very few women were present in missions. Most troop contributing countries did not even have female representation on their orbits. In proportion, the deployment of females, especially in my earlier missions, that is Rwanda and Lebanon, was very small. One could literally count how many women were present in the mission. And this could be attributed to typecasting the woman in domestic roles and a lack of confidence in the female soldiers' ability to function effectively and successfully in peacekeeping operations. Over the years, however, and especially during my last deployment in Liberia, I was happy to have witnessed a significant increase in the numbers of women deployed in peacekeeping by most troop contributing countries. There is no doubt that the nature of the woman guarantees us a special place and function in peacekeeping. As a female soldier with 5 mission assignments to my credit, I testify to the special skills and positive influence of female soldiers in winning hearts and minds and promoting human rights in peacekeeping. There is therefore still the need to ensure that the numbers of female peacekeepers are significantly boosted in order to benefit from the special interpersonal skills that women by their very nature bring to the theater of peacekeeping operations. My experience as the only female MOWIP in my team based in Mombasa in the Ituri region of the Democratic Republic of Congo comes to mind here. My team was often very successful in interaction and acquisition of vital information from the largely female local population, principally due to the presence of a female whom they considered as one of their kind. The opportunity to participate in peacekeeping brings with it complex international and cultural issues and problems with operating in a multinational environment. The need for excellent communication skills as a tool for functioning in a multinational, multicultural environment can therefore not be underestimated. As a woman peacekeeper, this is even more pronounced when you arrive, as I did, in UNIFIL in 2000, to find that there was very little preparation made to receive a woman peacekeeper at the UNIFIL headquarters in Nakura. The few women in the mission were deployed with their formed troops. I, on the other hand, was deploying as a staff officer and the only female serving at the time at the UNIFIL headquarters. There were several challenges for me. To start with, there was no place reserved for female accommodation and ablution. I managed to secure one prefab located in the midst of the male peacekeepers to myself. This was without ablution facilities, and I had to use a central ablution unit used by the male peacekeepers with all its inconveniences. My first few days were a nightmare until my assistant from Ireland offered me the use of the Irish mess ablution unit, which was only safe to use early in the mornings and late in the night. My biggest cultural problem was my struggle to fit in and be accepted as a qualified partner in the quest for peace in Lebanon. Some peacekeepers coming from countries where women are marginalized found it difficult to operate in the same environment as myself. At the international mess where we took our meals, such peacekeepers would make a conscious effort to avoid sharing space with me on a table. In my work as the Chief Military Personnel and Welfare Officer with a staff of 5, I encountered some resistance and subtle bullying that I attributed to the fact that my counterparts were not used to taking commands from a woman. Having been given equal opportunity in my armed forces back at home, this was a bit unsettling at the beginning. To achieve my objective, however, I resolved not to be intimidated by my colleagues and the fact that I was in the minority in the headquarters staff. My resolve and determination to succeed in my appointment saw me through all the trying situations in the mission. I'm confident in saying that my tenure as a staff officer with UNIFIL remains my most successful, from which I learned valuable lessons for consequent missions. Another observation I made during my deployment in all the missions was the deployment of female peacekeepers, largely in the traditional woman's role. In stereotyping the woman again, most troop contributing countries featured their women in roles such as cooks, waiters, clerks, etc. There was little or no consideration for cross-training to enable cross-assignments for female soldiers. A significant observation here is that women soldiers receive the same basic training as their male counterparts in their respective armed forces. This should mean that, given the chance and the requisite preparation for peacekeeping operations, women could also function effectively in non-traditional roles. Psychological care, especially in mission, where soldiers are stressed and often contend with long periods of separation from their families, is vital to the well-being of the soldier. It is worth noting that though TCCs, troop contributing countries, deployed with medical support, very little attention was given to in-mission psychological support needed desperately to maintain the mental health of troops. I wish to place on record the strides of the Ghana Armed Forces, to which I belong, in continuing to in addressing some of these issues towards ensuring that women are proportionally and meaningfully deployed in peacekeeping operations. With over 50 years of experience as global peacekeepers, the Ghana Armed Forces was one of the first to deploy female soldiers in international peacekeeping. As a manifestation of the growing confidence in the capabilities of its female personnel, the Ghana Armed Forces, with a female ratio of approximately 18%, has a deployment ratio of between 19 to 25% females in peacekeeping presently. There have been efforts at cross-training to ensure the deployment of some women of the Ghana Armed Forces in key appointments and combat roles in peacekeeping. And for senior female officers such as myself, there is the onerous task to encourage junior female officers to give of their best in soldiers and officers to give of their best in peacekeeping. Let me commend the Elsie Initiative for the MOWIP findings and recommendations, which when fully addressed and implemented, would guarantee the achievement of relevant deployment and participation of women in peacekeeping operations. Thank you.
So much, Brigadier General, for sharing your experiences with us, but more importantly for your resolve and your amazing accomplishments. We continue, I think, all of us to learn from Ghana and are really looking forward to Ghanaian leadership of the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial next year. It's now my pleasure to turn to Deborah Warren-Smith. Deborah, how can UN member states support troop and police contributing countries with identifying barriers to women's meaningful participation in peace operations and with implementing some of the recommendations that have been raised today?
Thank you very much for that question, and such an insightful story from the Brigadier from Ghana. Thank you very much for your honesty in sharing your experiences throughout your career. And I'm sure that there are lots of women who would echo some of those stories, but your resolve is noted. Thank you. So turning to the question, there's kind of two parts to that question. One is how can the UN and member states, how can the UN separately and how can member states support troop and police contributing countries? So I'd like to break that down, but before I start, I would like to thank the Canadian Permanent Mission and the co-sponsors, being Ghana, Jordan, Norway, and Uruguay, and just for the opportunity to talk today and represent the Elsie Initiative Fund. And we are one of the components of the broader Elsie Initiative, along with the MOWIP study and DCAF support there and a number of other initiatives under the broader Canadian Elsie Initiative. And in any discussion on a MOWIP assessment, I think it is very important to note that a decision to undertake a MOWIP requires a dedicated and serious commitment by a troop and police contributing country. And that includes the long-term and sustained commitment to then address and implement the evidence-based recommendations, as well as to share the good practices. And I particularly commend those countries who have already shown leadership in undertaking a MOWIP and are now moving towards designing projects to really address some of those root causes and action recommendations from those assessments. So from a UN perspective, how can the UN support TPCCs with identifying barriers? I see there's probably 3 levels in this area. So the first one is at the DPO level. And when I talk about DPO, I talk about the Office of Military Affairs and Police Division. So they are able to encourage TPCCs and potential TPCCs to consider applying to the fund for funding to undergo a barrier assessment using the MOWIP methodology. And a point from the fund is that we will be launching our 3rd programming round early next year. So that is one key opportunity to grab hold of and run with. And these discussions obviously can occur during meetings with permanent missions and the DPO. So where troop and police contributing countries are struggling to meet the Secretary General's UGPS targets, a discussion on the how, I know, is always difficult. You know, how do we do this? What are other things that other countries have done? And so during those discussions, one of the hows could be, well, perhaps you could consider applying to the fund, meeting with the fund and discussing with the fund to learn from other activities that other TPCCs have done, and to then conduct a barrier assessment and then work on addressing those barriers that are particular to that country and that security institution. And noting that priority is being given to formed police units that include women, funding support from the Elsie Fund can be a very effective way to incentivize a TPCC to commit to identifying and overcoming barriers and using the recommendations that are supported by data and grounded in evidence. Dropping down a level to a UN country team. In some instances of TPCCs that we have supported, the UN country team has supported that country to apply to the fund. And that could either be using the good offices of UN Women or UNDP, or in fact, any other UN agency that is working in that country team. And they can partner with the TPCC to apply to the fund for funding to undergo a barrier assessment. And certainly with UN Women country offices, they are also expertly positioned to provide technical gender expertise and coordination expertise as well. And then dropping down perhaps to a mission level itself, we know that barriers are not only found within TPCCs, but they are also found within mission environments, as we have heard from our previous speaker. So the fund can support projects to improve working and living environments within a peacekeeping mission, to test innovations, and ultimately to remove barriers to women's full participation in that mission, and therefore creating a more receptive environment across the physical, social, and cultural domains for both women and men. And indeed, activities to create a more receptive mission environment may also go some way to improving peacekeepers' mental health while in mission. And it is the mental health that we've heard about projects from both DPO and results from the Global MOWIP study. And the fund is currently supporting UNIFIL to improve and provide gender-sensitive living accommodation to support the increased numbers of women that Ghana Battalion or Ghana are deploying to UNIFIL mission. So those are the 3 levels within the UN and the UN system. Coming back to the second part of that question, what can member states do to identify and support TPCCs to identify those barriers? I could come with a very long shopping list, but let me just break it down into 4 points here. Member states can work with TPCCs to encourage them to apply to the fund for funding to undergo a barrier assessment and then subsequent projects to identify, to design activities to get after those barriers. A member state can also partner directly with a Tpcc to support them through the process of undertaking the barrier assessment, acknowledging that it is within that particular country's context and the security institutions context. And that could be through a mechanism such as a bilateral relationship. Thirdly, and this may be jumping the gun a little bit here, but through the support, a member state could support the establishment of a regional centre with MOWIP experience. And this is where I talk about regional centres, perhaps within the Latin American and Caribbean bloc, or within countries such as Ghana, who already has demonstrated expertise in applying the MOWIP with their Ghana armed forces. And so by supporting the establishment of a regional centre of expertise in the application of the MOWIP, that is another way to spread that knowledge and spread the capacity to support countries to undergo MOWIP assessments. And lastly, and this is where I look at every individual country who is here, a last way is to encourage member states to lead by example. And we've heard that Germany has already undertaken the barrier assessment, shared their results, and I understand that Norway and Canada are at various stages throughout conducting a MOWIP. And so that is really leading by example, and then by sharing the good practices and lessons learned from those activities. And a plug for the fund. To date, we are supporting 14 security institutions from 9 troop and police contributing countries to undergo a MOWIP. And then my second plug here would be not only to thank our donors, but continue to highlight the fact that the fund would need additional funding in our 3rd programming and 4th programming rounds to continue the good work that TPCCs are doing in this implementation process. And then coming down to the final part of your question, how can member states support troop and police contributing countries with implementing some of the recommendations that have been raised today? I think I've already covered one in terms of a more receptive mission environment within missions could go some way to improving the mental health and perhaps a number of the other issues that are found within a mission environment. But again, they're actually quite simple. It is about sharing good practices and then implementing those good practices in individual TPCCs. It's also about understanding and committing to longitudinal studies to measure the impact and the effectiveness of not only the global MOWIP, but then the activities that are undertaken to address those barriers. And again, we will always come back to the financial and policy support to trial and test the innovative practices, and that includes embracing technological applications, such as a mental health app tracker on your mobile phone. And again, we cannot do any of this if we do not have the data to support this. And this is where I'm talking about disaggregated data, not just men and women, but by rank, by specialty, and by position. Because if we don't have that data, it is impossible to analyse and track trends and then do that longitudinal study and evaluation. There is a lot more that I could wax lyrical about here, but let me just conclude on the reflection, and Fatty made this, I think, very eloquently, that to address any of these barriers, there is a concerted effort required not only by the UN, but by individual member states to address, embrace, and start to move the needle and keep the foot on the accelerator. So thank you very much once again for the opportunity to talk from the fund's perspective and highlight some of the work that the fund is doing to support countries to undergo the MOWIP and also the global MOWIP as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thanks so much for reminding us just how open the door is to working with you and your colleagues on this. I'll now open the floor for our Q&A. encourage you to put questions to the panelists. For those in the room, there are these mics. For those of you who are used to the UN, it's the opposite. So green, you can speak, red, it's not working. For those online, please note in the chat if you want to make an intervention, and we'll try to get to you. And as I said a little bit earlier, if you can introduce yourself with your country or your organizational affiliation when you pose your question or make your comment, that would be appreciated by the panelists. Does anybody want to help kick us off? Look here in the room first. Yes, sir, in the back of the room on the left.
Thank you very much. My name is Naeem. I'm representing the mission of Pakistan, and we have been top troops contributing countries for many decades, and one of the top troops country even now. The WPS initiatives and all these things, what we are doing for the women is very noble cause. We really appreciate that, and we align ourselves with the general sentiment of doing these things. But and we are, because of these 70 years of peacekeeping experiences which we have, you know, and we can share some of our aspects as well with this August audience as well. As we all know that the missions are getting more and more complicated and more dangerous, you know. And but at the same time, we have to keep moving on this WPS agenda. After all, Rome was not built in a single year. So we have to take three aspects which I want to highlight. One is the cost and the resource allocation element. You know, we need to do costing on these WPS initiatives and try to provide them to the mission so that, you know, it can be accommodated organically and successfully. The second is this, in this report, this is somewhere I was reading, it was written that on the safety of the peacekeepers, that, you know, are the societies ready to take the women peacekeeper as casualties, you know. I must say that for many societies, they may not be ready yet, you know, so we have to work on that. And we want to tell that, you know, because of these IEDs and so many other problems, you know, this is a dangerous proposition of, you know, working in difficult circumstances where the men and the women are working. We want to save both men and the woman. And we want to tell you that, you know, because of the right work, we are saving many men and women on the ground as well, where there is the missions are working as well. The last point which I want to highlight is one of the speaker was saying about the data. You know, it is very important that the data should be taken from many different regions so that it should not be statistically skewed as well. So as a bottom line, you know, this should be WPS agenda and all these things should be formed into the main missions, but we have to keep in mind that the success of the mission is the most important thing. And within that component is WPS. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his comments. Others who want to, yes. If you can turn your microphone on, just push the, sorry. It's easier for the people online to hear.
I introduce myself. I'm Brigadier General Elsie Initiative. I am the gender advisor of the Israel Defense Force. I just want to say thank you for having me here today. I have also just completed meeting with the Canadian Armed Force, and one of our topic was discussion about the barriers of equal opportunity. And thank you for the informative presentation and the panel. I think we find that we have a similar challenge, and I believe that we must keep working together to create a strategic policy. So thank you so much.
I thank you so much. Thanks for joining us this afternoon as well. Anybody else, either online or here in the room? Yes, Emily, please.
Thanks very much, Ambassador Arbeiter, and panelists, thank you so much for your remarks. Emily Byrne from the Australian Mission. I guess I would be interested in hearing from you some further comments around recommendation 3, strengthening the harassment and bullying response of missions. And I suppose just what you found in your report that led to this, this recommendation. And, you know, whether there is, I suppose, as we see an increase in the number of women in missions, any backlash that comes with that around harassment or bullying in missions. So would welcome your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. Anybody else here in the room? Before we go back to the panelists or anybody online? No? Great, so we've got three sets of comments and a question there at the end. I'll maybe start here and then I'll ask the Brigadier General if she'd like to join. Christina or Deborah, would you like to?
Thank you very much. So maybe just a word on cost and resource allocation and success of the mission. Completely agree, success of the mission is the ultimate goal, and creating a sustainable peace. And what the data has shown us is actually the best way to do that is to make sure a peace operation is gender equal, gender mainstreamed, and that women are able to participate meaningfully. That is the overwhelming result of the data that we've found. So in terms of costing and resourcing, it actually not only pays for itself, but it actually costs you not to make sure that women can participate meaningfully, because then you're not having as successful of a mission. You're going to be spending more money, more time trying to achieve the goals in a less successful fashion. Maybe just a word on the harassment. You'll also see in the report that there are the four main findings that I went over, and then you will also see the list of recommendations for how to address those. So what we found is that there needs to be strengthened harassment and bullying response and prevention. This can be addressed through design and implementation of policy frameworks, increasing training, but also it's a really holistic response that we're looking for. So if you look at the 10 issue areas that the MOWIP methodology goes through, you have issues around harassment and bullying, but you also have issues around top-down leadership and social inclusion. And so what we found is that you need top-down leadership. What is the extent to which leadership is involved? What is the extent to which women are actually mainstreamed and given opportunities to participate meaningfully? Because if they're not part of, if they're not made a part of the mission, if those rigid gender roles continue, then you're not going to have a successful mission. You're going to have problems with harassment and bullying. So along with the recommendations around addressing that directly, that also, because I should say all of the recommendations are very much interwoven and interlinked. So the recommendations around looking at the character profile of candidates and making sure that you have peacekeepers who actually have a gender equality, human rights framework and perception is critical to the success of the mission. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Christina. Go ahead.
Very much, Christina, and thank you for the observations and question as well. I would just like to kind of highlight one point in relation to noting that missions are becoming more complex and dangerous. One of the questions I would ask, though, to women and men peacekeepers is, and you would have to ask them themselves, as a woman peacekeeper, as a male peacekeeper, you are trained. Your training is the same depending on what function you are deploying into. But I think it behoves us to ask women, are you prepared to deploy to these dangerous and complex mission environments? And I would suggest that many of the women would say, yes, they are. So it's about asking the women as well as the men, are they prepared to deploy? And if a woman puts her hand up to deploy, I would suggest that she's ready to deploy and willing and able and trained and capable. In relation to talking about, and this is linking one of the points from the Global MOWIP, talking about the contact and combat skills, I'd just like to go back to the Action for Peacekeeping Plus. And so the Global MOWIP report findings notes the importance of contact skills as well as combat skills. And both of those are necessary for a complex peacekeeping mission. And the Action for Peacekeeping Plus talks about capabilities and mindsets, and that in recent years, DPO has collectively improved uniformed capabilities and reduced the number of units and critical capability gaps. And I would like to state here that I think that women also are a capability in themselves. So we therefore need to ensure that future peacekeeping operations have the right capabilities, which includes women, and that they are in the right place at the right time and with the right mindsets. And I quote that directly from the A4P+. And therefore, on the strength of the MOWIP findings, we need to work collectively together to make sure that we also include the right skills, being combat and contact skills. And therefore, both in the UN and the member state, working together to make sure that training includes those skills. And I'll leave it there at this stage, and I'll throw the floor open to Brigadier from Ghana, please.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Brigadier General, if we've still got you on the line, would you like to comment on any of the observations, questions that were made?
Yes, I'd like to add my voice to the previous speaker about ladies deploying in missions, looking at how dangerous situations are these days. I agree that we need to ask the woman and perhaps the man too, whether you would want to deploy or not. But then again, beyond how dangerous it is, let us also keep in mind how important or sometimes how vital a role the woman can play in the field of peacekeeping. It is very important that we have women there. So as many women as would want to deploy, I think should be given the chance to.
So much. I'm afraid we're at the end of our scheduled time. So if you'll permit me, I'll just say a few things in closing. You know, this session today, but frankly, this agenda is all about continuous learning, right? And it's all about, as we heard a little bit earlier, starting with the concerted decision to be better for the communities that we serve, to be better internally and to be better externally, and to learn how to be better by understanding what are the barriers to being better. It's actually not that much more complicated than that. What Elsie and MOWIP have afforded us is the platform through which to conduct that learning, both internally and externally. And the benefit of this third programming round is that it affords us this opportunity to increase the diversity of experiences so that they're not skewed. And so I would just encourage all of us, again, to focus on the partnership elements, to take that decision, talk to UN Women and others at Elsie Fund to learn about how you can leverage this opportunity so that we can all benefit from the different experiences that we're going through kind of internally, and therefore contribute better externally. I think that's our collective agenda. So with that, let me thank once again all of our co-hosts today from Ghana, Jordan, Norway, and Uruguay. Let me thank as well our panelists and our partners at DCAF. Let me thank all of you for joining us both here in the room and online. Let me thank Lynn Wallace, my colleague, for helping to organize all of this here today. Of course, Brigadier General online with us, Deborah, Christina, as well, for sharing your insights and your learnings and continuing to extend that hand of partnership for us as we continue to try to do this better. Thanks very much. Merci tout le monde. We'll see you again soon.